This is Dave Klein reading for Chris Pereira. Diablo 2 is back with Diablo 2 Resurrected. While the remaster isn't all that different from the original game, with its primary differences being a visual overhaul and quality of life improvements, it still does contain some mechanics that can be worth discussing for new players and even veteran Diablo 3 players. So here are some essential tips for Diablo 2 newcomers. Your first decision upon booting up the game is choosing the right class. Unfortunately, like many games of this nature, without having played any of the game, it can be hard to choose which class is right for you. While Diablo 2 does let you roll additional new characters, there's still no swapping classes once you've made your choice, so anytime you sink into a character will be for naught if you decide you'd rather play something else. While this is an entirely subjective choice, some classes are definitely better suited for newcomers than others. Paladins and Necromancers are our choices for good starter classes. Paladins can take plenty of damage and can heal without potions. Meanwhile, Necromancers can summon an army of minions who will not only dish out damage, but more importantly, distract and absorb enemy attacks, helping to keep you alive. And look, there's no issue with choosing a class that you think you'll have more fun with, they just might be more difficult, like the Sorceress, who's heavily dependent on spellcasting and mana, but is relatively frail, making it a more challenging character to play solo at the start. There are numerous class builds and radically different ways of playing as any given class. So, a good strategy is to min-max your character's builds and hone in on improving the abilities that best serve the way you play and the strategy you intend to use. While you're free to mix and match skills as you wish, it's generally best to make a plan and invest accordingly. You have a limited number of skill points to allot, meaning you won't be able to acquire everything in the skill tree, and even if you do invest heavily in a particular skill, that may dictate what other skills you should choose due to skill synergies. Resurrected features a respec system, so you aren't entirely locked into the choices you make, but there are limitations on it, so don't plan on being able to freely experiment to the same degree that you can in Diablo 3. One gameplay mechanic that might catch you off guard is stamina. Essentially, you can only sprint for a limited period of time before running out of stamina and being forced to walk. You can toggle between running and walking on your own to preserve stamina and ensure you aren't left on empty if you suddenly need to put some distance between you and an enemy. While some items, like stamina potions, can help provide a boost, it's still something you should always keep an eye on along with your health and mana, particularly if you're playing solo. The first time you die, you might be surprised to find that you'll respawn back in town, sans gear. In order to recover your loot, you'll need to make your way back to your corpse and pick it up. But without any armor, you'll be extremely vulnerable, so keeping backup items in your stash for these cases is a smart move, though be aware that you'll need room in your inventory to pick up your previous items. If you're venturing into a tough fight, it's also wise to open a town portal before starting, which will save you the frustrating walk all the way back to where you died. Luckily, if you do die again before recovering your corpse, you'll just drop additional corpses, so this isn't a case where you only have a single chance to get your gear back. You can also save yourself some potential headache by storing gold in your stash, ensuring you won't need to recover your corpse to get it back. Of course, if you're playing on hardcore mode, where a single death spells the end, all of your progress is lost upon death, but at least you won't need to store pesky backup armor, right? Be mindful of fights with enemies who can resurrect their allies. And when you can, always tackle them first, they're not just respawning hordes of enemies on repeat. Definitely pay attention to the enemy attributes displayed at the top of the screen, where you might see a stat, Raises Fallen, showing that this will be an enemy who can use resurrection. Throughout the game, you'll encounter other enemies that should be prioritized ahead of lesser foes. Among the items available from the NPC Akara, your first quest giver are 2 tomes, one for Scrolls of Town Portal and another for Scrolls of Identify. These scrolls are highly useful, as the former let you quickly visit town and then return to the action, while the latter reveal hidden attributes on items which must be done before they're equipped. You'll always want to have some of these scrolls on you, even though they do take up some inventory space. That said, each of these can hold up to 20 of their respective scrolls, so they are definitely worth the space investment. Once you enlist the help of Deckard Cain, the need for scrolls of Identify will be dramatically reduced, and he'll be able to identify items en masse whenever you return to town, but you'll want access to town portals throughout the game. You'll come across a lot of loot as you play, and not all of it is necessarily worth picking up. While you can sell anything back in town, repeatedly returning can quickly become tedious and will cost you a small amount in the form of a scroll of town portal. As such, your time is better spent only picking up more valuable items. Those that are specific to a class, like wands, sacred globes, scepters, barbarian helmets, and so on, are a good bet, as are rings/amulets and items that provide a point to one of a class's skills. Focus on nabbing these instead of bolts or other low-value items that take up a lot of space to maximize your earnings and reduce the number of trips back to town you need to make. Diablo 2 doesn't have an endgame like you'd expect from a modern game, and eventually you'll likely spend a lot of time on boss runs where you repeatedly square off against the boss to earn better items. But even before reaching that point, you may find yourself underpowered, so you'll want to grind out XP and items by repeating certain sections of the game. Tristram, the Countess, Act 1's Catacombs, Act 2's Tombs, Act 3's Council, and so on are fertile ground for earning XP more quickly than usual, so be prepared to make your way through these numerous times. Everyone can enlist help even without diving into multiplayer. As you progress through the early Act 1 story, you'll gain the ability to hire your first mercenary from Kasia. You can only have one merc at a time, so you'll want to make sure you choose one that complements your class. Pay attention to their skills when looking to hire one. A rogue with Cold Arrow might be less useful to you if you're a sorceress who can already slow down enemies, or a necromancer with summons who will divert enemies' attention. Once you have a mercenary, make sure to equip them with gear to increase their effectiveness. Also of note is that ethereal items, which can't be repaired, are useful with mercs due to the fact that merc-equipped items don't lose durability. Early on, you'll begin acquiring gems that can be placed into items with sockets. These can be extremely beneficial, and socketed weapons in particular can provide you with a major damage boost. Even if the inherent attributes of an item aren't great, bear in mind that a sufficient number of sockets can be transformative if you use them in the right way. And that's where rune words come in. Like the various gems you'll find, runes can be placed into sockets for beneficial effects, but if specific runes are inserted into items in a particular order, you'll activate a rune word, which provides extremely important effects that go beyond what the individual runes would normally provide. This allows you to even be able to use abilities for classes that wouldn't normally have them. You can find rune word lists online from the original game, but a crucial thing to note is that they're only compatible with items that have gray text. For example, magical items, which are designated by their blue text, don't support rune words. All of that said, the stats of the item are still relevant for making the most of a rune word, so don't be too quick to throw runes into the first item with sockets that you happen upon. In the early game, farming Countess in Act 1 is a good way to acquire runes. In Act 2, you'll acquire the Horadric Cube. By placing specific items inside, the cube can convert them into something else. There are tons of recipes, but it's important to know that even something as simple as chipped gems can be placed inside to upgrade them to the next level of rarity. 3 chipped rubies become 1 flawed ruby, while 3 flawed rubies become 1 ruby, and so on. 3 runes of the same type can also be combined to obtain a different specific rune, or an equipable item can be upgraded to the next rarity level. So these are all of our beginner tips for you if you're new to Diablo 2. And if this is your first time playing, get ready for one of gaming's classics, and a game that would go on to be hugely influential in the industry. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let us know what you think of Diablo 2 Resurrected.